This is Dan Dix here reporting for Press for Truth, and today we're going to be looking at an absolute bombshell of a report coming out from Macleans that would suggest that the Nova Scotia shooter was working for the RCMP as either an informant or possibly as an agent. The article goes on here to say the Nova Scotia shooter case has hallmarks of an undercover operation. Police sources say the killer's withdrawal of $475,000 was highly irregular, and that's how an RCMP agent would get money. So in this video, we're obviously going to talk about the major implications behind this report. And we're also going to look at some of the past examples that we've had here in Canada in the past, like the case with these the Canada Day bombers, where it was revealed that they were pushed into the plan. The courts later threw out the terrorism conviction in Canada, citing police entrapment. Of course, who could forget Mubin Shaikh, from the Islamic extremist to government informant? This is the man who infiltrated the now infamous Toronto 18, where those kids were completely set up, not only by him, but by another CSIS informant who seek to get paid by the RCMP $15 million for his involvement in the operation. So we're going to be looking at these past examples of how the RCMP and the Canadian government have been doing this in the past, and this new bombshell report coming out from Macleans that would suggest similar things are going on with the Nova Scotia shooter. Obviously, there are big implications there that would suggest the very real possibility of this potentially being a false flag operation with the intentions of bringing about strict gun control here in Canada. So we're going to cover all that and much more, guys. But just before we do, I'd ask that you check us out here on Subscribestar. Subscribestar.com/pressfortruth. This is like a Patreon alternative where you can sign up for a monthly reoccurring amount. $5, $10, $20, any amount is greatly appreciated. So if you appreciate my efforts on this channel to bring you this information, please check the links in the description below to find out how you can join us here on Subscribestar. All right, so obviously there's some pretty big implications when it comes to suggesting that this man was working with the RCMP all along. Now, if you've been paying attention to my work, you'll know that the day after the shooting happened, I put out this video titled Nova Scotia Mass Shooting Leads to New Strict Gun Control Laws, What You Need to Know. And in it, I explained before the official death count had been tallied with bodies potentially still smoldering in the rubble, Justin Trudeau took the opportunity to manipulate people's emotions into accepting new strict gun control laws. And indeed, it appeared that they had already had all their ducks in a line ready to go when it came to stripping Canadians of their guns before this perfectly convenient incident occurred. And now, as we see, and we're going to go through, we're going to see that it really does look like this man was working very closely with the RCMP. But before we get into that, I want to remind you about these past examples. Like this one here. I put out this video back in 2015 called Canadian Terror Plot Exposed as RCMP Setup. An undercover corporal became Nuttall's mentor. This is Nuttall right there. It wasn't just the material supplies of cash, cigarettes, groceries, cars, hotels, cell phones, logistical supplies, and the inert bombs. The undercover cop was acting as a mentor to Nuttall. But more than that, Nuttall kept having reservations about the plan. The RCMP wanted him in Victoria for a recon mission. He wanted to visit family. They wanted him to die for the cause. He said he had debts and that he couldn't do a true jihad. So the RCMP said they'd see about paying off anything he owes. Nuttall didn't know that his mentor was the RCMP the whole time, but it should have been clear to the undercover agent that he was sane enough not to kill himself. He kept coming up with barriers to a jihadist success, and so the RCMP kept offering ways around those barriers. That's how they do it. It's entrapment. They recruit these mentally ill individuals and bait them into doing these things. The court ended up overthrowing their terrorism charges. Sting operations, in which an undercover agent or informant provides the means and opportunity to lure otherwise incapable people into committing a crime, have represented the default tactic for counterterrorism precautions since the 9/11 attacks. So this is just the normal around here in Canada. This is just simply how things are done. Of course, this is the man who infiltrated the Toronto 18. Now, we're going to look at how the RCMP pays its agents in this video, so it's important to look at this. An RCMP informant central to disrupting a plot to bomb several targets in Ontario initially requested $15 million in compensation from the Mounties, the courts heard Tuesday. Sahar El-Sahomi was in his second week of testimony at the trial of his former friend Sharif Abdulrahim, who has pleaded not guilty to participating in terrorist attacks. It goes on to show how he actually ended up getting paid out. We see some pretty big payouts, up to $750,000 for the loss of his business. $100,000 was given to him for 2 cars. Another $100 for startup, including furniture. $200,000 in a category that had been blocked out by the document. $75,000 for his parents' cars. Another $40,000 to pay off his parents' debts. They also included $30,000 for his younger brother's car. $100,000 for a startup for his younger brother, another $100,000 for his older brother's debts, $30,000 for his brother's car, and a further $150,000 under another blacked out category. So the informant business is pretty lucrative, as you can see. The RCMP have been involved in paying out guys like this before, and we know that they've been involved in setting up people before as well. So let's get into the nitty-gritty of this bombshell report here and really break it down for you today. It says here, the withdrawal of $475,000 in cash by the man who killed 22 Nova Scotians in April matches the method the RCMP uses to send money to confidential informants and agents, sources say. Gabriel Wortman, who is responsible for the largest mass killing in Canadian history, withdrew the money from a Brink's depot in Dartmouth, Nova Scotia on March 30th, stashing a carryall filled with $100 bills in the trunk of his car. According to a source close to the police investigation, the money came from CIBC Intria, a subsidiary of the chartered bank that handles currency transactions. Sources in both banking and the RCMP say the transaction is consistent with how the RCMP funnels money to its confidential informants and agents, and it's not an option available to private banking customers. The RCMP has repeatedly said that they had no special relationship with Wortman, and we'll get back to that. Court documents show Wortman owned a New Brunswick registered company called Berkshire Broman, the legal owner of his 2 vehicles, including one of his police replica cars. Whatever the purpose of that company, there's no public evidence that it would have been able to move large quantities of cash. Wortman also ran his own denturist business, and there is no reason to believe it also would require him to handle large amounts of cash. If Wortman was an RCMP informant or agent, it could explain why the force appeared to not take action on complaints about his illegal guns and his assault on his common law wife. A Mountie familiar with the techniques used by the force in undercover operations, but not with the details of the investigation and the shooting, says Wortman could not have collected his own money from Brink's as a private citizen. This is just not something regular citizens can do. There's no way a civilian can just make an arrangement like that, he said in an interview. He added that Wortman's transaction is consistent with the Mountie's experience in how the RCMP pays its assets. I've worked a number of CI cases over the years, and that's how things go. All the payments are made in cash. To me, that transaction alone proves he has a secret relationship with the force. A second Mountie who does not know the first one, but who has also been involved in CI operations, also believes that Wortman's ability to withdraw large sums of money from the Brinks is an indication that Wortman had a link with the police. That's tradecraft, the Mountie said, explaining that by going through CIBC Intra, the RCMP could avoid typical banking scrutiny as there are no holds placed on the money. That's what we do when we need to flash money about for a buy. We don't keep stashes of money around the office. When we suddenly need a large sum of money to make a buy or something, that's the route we take. I think with the Brink's transaction, you proved with that single fact that he had a relationship with the police. He was either a CI or an agent. Huge implications here. A Canadian retail banking expert speaking on condition that they not be identified says it is unlikely that Wortman was cashing out his own savings when he collected the money from the Brinks after the money was transferred from CIBC Intra. When you come into my branch and you want a ton of cash, then I say you got to give us a couple of days. We put it in our Brinks order. I order the money through Brinks. Then the money arrives. You come back to the branch. I bring you into the back room and I count the money for you, he said. Sending someone to Brinks to get the money? I've never heard of that before. The reason is, if I'm the banker and you've deposited your savings in my bank branch, I'm responsible for making sure the money goes to the right person. If you want this money, I'm going to have to verify your identity and document that. I can't do that if I'm transferring money to Brinks. In response to detailed questions from Macleans about the transaction, a CIBC spokesperson replied via email, and get a load of this, "Our hearts and thoughts are with the families and the entire community as they deal with this senseless tragedy and loss. Unfortunately, we are not able to comment on specific clients' matters." Brinks did not reply to questions about the transaction. The banking expert speculates that the RCMP could keep transactions relatively quiet by going through Brinks instead of a bank to transfer money to a confidential informant or an agent. You can imagine that if someone comes in with large sums of cash, that stuff is not kept quiet. You don't want that. Maybe what the RCMP was doing is they thought they could keep things quieter simply by transferring funds via Brinks. At a press briefing on June 4th, Nova Scotia RCMP Superintendent Darren Campbell seemed to rule out the possibility that Wortman was a confidential informant for the force. The gunman was never associated to the RCMP as a volunteer or auxiliary police officer, nor did the RCMP ever have any special relationship with the gunman of any kind. However, the RCMP Operations Manual, a copy of which was obtained by Macleans, authorizes the force to mislead all but the courts in order to conceal the identity of confidential informants and agent sources. That includes misleading the media, misleading you and me into believing this man was not, in fact, an informant or an agent. The identity of a source must be protected at all times, except when the administration of justice requires otherwise, i.e., a member cannot mislead a court in any proceeding in order to protect a source. But it can mislead the media. A spokeswoman for the Nova Scotia RCMP declined further comment after Macleans reported on the financial transaction. Of course, the police are going to say, this is still an active, ongoing investigation. Said Jennifer Clark in an email on Friday, all investigative avenues and possibilities continue to be explored, analyzed, and processed with due diligence. This is to ensure that the integrity of the investigation is not compromised. We cannot release anything more related to your questions. Macleans reported earlier this week that sources say that Wortman had social relationships with Hells Angels and with a neighbor, Peter Allen Griffin, who recently finished serving part of a 7-year sentence for drug and firearm offenses linked to La Familia, a Mexican cartel. Sources say Griffin printed the decals that Wortman used on the police RCMP cruiser that he used on his rampage. Sources say that RCMP in New Brunswick, Nova Scotia recently took over operational control of investigations into outlaw bikers and Maritimes, which means that Nova Scotia Mounties may not have been aware of any connection to Wortman. The RCMP Operations Manual identifies 2 types of sources: informant sources and agent sources. A law enforcement source said that the force's use of Brinks to make a large payment is to agent sources, not informant sources. Informants are never paid more than a couple hundred at a time, said a person briefed on RCMP operations. Anything over $10,000 is agent money. Agents typically have greater responsibilities than informants do. Only officers who have received specialized training are allowed to handle agents. An agent source is a person tasked by investigators to assist in the development of target operations, says the manual. Directive involvement and association with the target may result in him or her becoming a material and compelled witness, i.e. a source used to introduce undercover operations, act as a carrier for controlled deliverers, or act in place of an RCMP undercover operator by obtaining evidence. If the money was a transfer from the RCMP to an agent, there would be a paper trail through FinTrack, the Financial Transactions and Reports Analysis Center of Canada, which tracks large cash transactions and suspicious transactions. Brinks does the FinTrack paperwork, saying it's coming from us. It's from a chartered bank, and the RCMP liaison at FinTrack signs off, handles the paperwork, said a source briefed on the system. The RCMP guys clear it, or they refer it to for further investigation. They manually clear those FinTrack reports coming from Brinks related to paid agents. The RCMP Operations Manual requires officers handling confidential informants and agents to send reports to the director of the Covert Operations Branch at the national headquarters. A headquarters media relations office said in an email Friday that Campbell's statement that the force never had a special relationship with Wortman still stands. So they're not budging on the idea that they're not working with them. The Attorney General of Nova Scotia, former RCMP Staff Sergeant Mark Fury, has said that the province is in talks with Ottawa about a joint federal-provincial inquiry or review of Wortman's murderous rampage. Fury's office did not reply before deadline to a question about whether the terms of the inquiry would allow inquiry counsel to pierce the powerful legal privilege that attaches to confidential informants. Family members of the victims have complained that the process is dragging out. As calls for an inquiry mount, so does speculation about what happened among both the general public and the RCMP. One former Mountie says he doesn't understand why Wortman would turn against the Mounties if they were paying him. What seems inconsistent to me is, why are you going to bite the hand that feeds you? If he's getting money, and that's a lot of money for an agent or a CI, that part does not make sense to me. The former investigator pointed out that if Wortman was acting for the RCMP and receiving that amount of money, he would eventually be expected to testify. If he was an agent, he should show up on a witness docket. But another Mountie says, this guy always wanted to be a Mountie. He was acting like a Mountie. He was doing Mountie things. It's clear to me that something went wrong. Wow. Unbelievable bombshell report coming out of Macleans that, again, is suggesting that this man was working for the RCMP, being paid by the RCMP, and when we know about all these former terror plots that have been allegedly foiled, and we find out that it was informants and agents who were setting these people up and coercing them and molding and shaping them into doing these terrible things, you can see how that may have been the case with the Nova Scotia shooter. Just like I said in this video, I mean, it was, you know, the same day that he was killed, that they were already calling for these strict gun control laws, and boom, it happened. They took the guns, thousands of rifles, boom, banned overnight. So this is just unbelievable, guys. I wanted to bring this shocking bombshell of a report to your attention and get your thoughts. What do you guys think about the possibility that the RCMP were using this man, this mentally deranged individual, for their own purposes in order to enact serious, strict gun control laws in Canada? Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. I also want to leave you off today with a video at the end of this video that I put out, let's see, almost 7 years ago now. It's called Conditioning Canadians for the War on Terror. And in it, I explain that with the onslaught of recent foiled terror plots we've seen here in Canada, one would think that there is an ongoing threat from either outside forces or from radicalized homegrown domestic extremists, as we are being led to believe. However, in each and every circumstance, there is a hidden hand at play, and in its grip lies a sinister motive to generate the fear of an attack in the minds of the Canadian people. And I think that very well may be exactly what we're witnessing with the Nova Scotia shooting incident. So please, guys, share this video. Click the thumbs up button if you found the information to be useful. Get the word out that there's more to the story than meets the eye here. Just as I suggested the day after it happened, they had their ducks in a line for gun control. That seemed very fishy to me. Now we're seeing new information that he withdrew nearly $500,000 in cash just before the shooting from what looks to be an RCMP controlled transaction link. This is huge, guys. Again, please share the video, click the thumbs up button. Don't forget to check us out here on Subscribestar if you appreciate my efforts to bring you this information. I've currently got 40 subscribers. If we could get that up to 45 or 50 today, that would be awesome. So please check the links in the description below to find out how you can do that. And that's all for today, my friends. I want to thank you all for tuning in once again. Stick around. We're going to have more reports coming very soon. This is Dan Dix reporting for Press for Truth. We all want truth. The truth will set you free.